The Martian is a 2015 sci-fi drama directed by Ridley Scott and written by Drew Goddard. It stars Matt Damon, Jessica Chastain, Jeff Daniels, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Donald Glover, Benedict Wong, Mackenzie Davis, Sebastian Stan, Kristen Wiig, Michael Pena, Sean Bean, Askell Hennie, and Kate Mara. It is probably the best and most realistic film about exploration of the Red Planet that's been made in recent years, surpassing the less than stellar outings of Red Planet and Mission to Mars, both of which I've previously reviewed in a comparison video. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that The Martian is a great film or anything. In fact, I think The Martian has quite a few problems. I think it's a decent enough film, but I would not consider it great. So I'll get a few criticisms of the film out of the way first. There's clearly an attempt here to push the diversity agenda. Jessica Chastain plays strong female mission leader, Commander Melissa Lewis. The smart science people are all minorities, and the administrator of NASA, Theodore Sanders, played by Jeff Daniels, is an unnecessarily cold, deeply unlikable, prickly character for just no reason. He's rude, gruff, and antagonistic at times. But hey, he is the white male in a position of authority, right? In addition, the film is lacking the kind of tension that you need in order to generate the kind of drama to keep the plot sufficiently energized at times. So it feels as if the character of Sanders is sort of there to compensate by creating conflict between the Earth-based NASA personnel. They tell him how long or how difficult their work is going to be to rescue Mark Watney, and he then gives them a verbal dressing down, telling them it's not good enough, blah blah blah, rinse and repeat. There's also the complete ghosting of Russia's space agency in this film. Everyone knows NASA in real life make use of Russian heavy lifters, and yet their assistance is never even considered. The team instead ask for help from the Chinese, who provide them a launch vehicle as part of a deal that would see a Chinese astronaut on the next Ares mission. So this sort of panders to the Chinese cinema-going market. Despite a few gripes, the film does have a lot going for it, including a great cast, some decent performances, great direction, amazing cinematography, solid visual effects, and fantastic location shooting. Wadi Rum in Jordan is the desert region used for the Martian landscape, and it's certainly very convincing as the Red Planet. So during a major storm on a human mission to Mars, a storm that creeps up on them all of a sudden, despite them already having been warned about it, astronaut Mark Watney is marooned on the planet and presumed dead, while the rest of the team launch and escape the planet. I have to say, a major storm they saw coming and should have been prepared for seems like a weak reason to have to leave Mars, don't you think? I mean, yes, it was causing their craft to tilt and sink, but why? Why wasn't the craft rated for the storm in the first place? I mean, heck, why is it even tilting at all? I tell you what, a fourth leg on the landing gear probably would have prevented that. Ending a multi-billion-dollar, possibly trillion-dollar manned mission to Mars because of a dust storm seems a bit on the unrealistic side. But okay, the story needs a justification for leaving Mark Watney behind. So they take off, and I will say the entire execution of the sequence is very well done. Sanders gives a speech to the press explaining that Watney has been killed, and the guy delivers the news without a hint of emotion or care in his voice. It's actually jarring and always takes me out of the film for a moment. There's just no universe where a public representative would deliver such tragic news in such a blasé and disinterested manner. Oh, by the way, one of the astronauts croaked it. Anyway, anyone got any questions? Make it quick, I have to go to lunch. That's the kind of attitude. Meantime, on the planet, Watney's alive, half buried in the sand and running low on oxygen, and he's injured, impaled in the stomach by a piece of metal, so he's got to patch himself up. It's gruesome, but very well done. I must say the highlight of the film is Matt Damon's character and his performance, as a likeable character who bravely faces his dire situation and learns to courageously overcome the various challenges that Mars throws at him. He does so with a healthy dose of good humour. He resourcefully works to grow vegetables, maintain the systems of the habitat, and communicate with Earth, journaling and narrating his progress with regular compelling audio diary entries. So a lot of the plot is advanced through Damon's voiceovers. Nevertheless, his situation starts out quite grim. The habitat is only designed for 31 days of use, and if the oxygenator breaks, he'll suffocate to death. If the water reclaimer breaks, he'll die of thirst. and if the HAB breaches, he'll implode. And of course, if none of that happens, it's likely he'll starve to death by running out of food. So Watney applies his botany skills and goes to work taking out the organic waste from the toilet and using it to make compost to grow vegetables. He uses polythene sheets to construct a large greenhouse, though he does have a minor accident when trying to create some water, pressurizing hydrogen and oxygen and flammability and all that. Anyway, his farming efforts eventually yield results. Back on Earth, NASA figure out that the rover has moved, meaning Watney is alive. They don't want to inform the crew yet, who are heading home, because that'll just distract them. But now the media know. Watney is quite an upbeat, chipper kind of guy in the face of overwhelming odds, and there's some gags in there about Commander Lewis's awful disco music, which is all he has to listen to. But much like the contrived conflict created by Sanders being a jerk back on Earth, the humour also regularly undercuts any potential tension in the story. There's just too much of it. As a result, we never truly feel like Watney is in any serious danger of dying. Too much of the action and plot developments are just played for cheap laughs. I have to say, besides Watney, very few of the other characters really have much charisma or likability. Their dialogue is also less what you'd expect from professional NASA personnel and more borderline petty high school backbiting at times. The only thing I know about the character of Annie Montrose, played by Kristen Wiig, is that she needs her job so she can pay alimony payments to two quote-unquote deadbeat ex-husbands, because somehow gender equality has bitten her square in the ass. Well, you did manage to make the decision to marry not one but two supposedly deadbeat husbands. Says more about your ability to choose a suitable partner, if anything. But seriously, why was that line in the film? I mean, why is that her character backstory? And the whole modern trope of defining a character by how dysfunctional they are is just incredibly lazy. And yeah, imagine the horror of equality between the genders when it comes to divorce settlements. Oh dear. The only other moderate bit of tension in the film, should they or should they not tell the crew of the Hermes that Mark Watney is alive? Incidentally, none of the crew are very compelling. Their dialogue is all the same generic, playful, sarcastic, witty banter that you hear from every hip and cool millennial character in Hollywood films from this period. None of them feel like believable, three-dimensional human beings, in my opinion, and they all speak in this similar manner, with snark and backchat. There's nothing that really differentiates them from each other beyond the individual actors' performances. Honestly, you could swap the dialogue from one character to the next, and fundamentally very little would change. All the characters are almost exactly the same, carbon copies of each other. Now, an explosion at the HAB kills Watney's crops, so it pushes up the resupply mission a little bit, and as a result, they have to cut some corners, and the resupply rocket explodes. There is one very nervy scene where, after taping up the HAB, the wind keeps blowing hard against the polythene sheets. Any slight tear would obviously suck all of the air out of that area. So after the resupply rocket explodes, they have to ask the Chinese for help. Anyway, the Hermes is going to go back in a slingshot maneuver around Mars to basically pick up Watney. And there's another annoying line of dialogue that happens in almost every popular sci-fi movie. The character of Beth Johansson is explaining something technical, to which the character of Rick Martinez says, "But like in English, what would that mean?" You know, when someone says something smart and then they say, "Oh, what does that mean in English," right? These people are scientists. How do they get into space not being able to understand basic, technical jargon and terms like this? Again, the film relies too heavily on witty, fast-paced dialogue exchanges designed to make the characters seem witty and sharp, instead of making them seem intelligent and professional and thoughtful, thus dumbing the film down for the audience. Watney makes use of the MAV from Ares 4, which is placed there before the craft arrives, so he uses this to intercept the Hermes in orbit of Mars. Watney actually has to cut a hole in his suit to create thrust, so he can literally fly around like Iron Man. Considering the Winter Soldier is also in this film, that seems appropriate. Anyway, without describing the entire end action scene, they manage to grab him in orbit, and get him home. The film ends with him teaching an astronaut candidate program. The Martian is missing something. I think it's missing better writing, to be honest. If you look at a film like Moon, which I've also reviewed, and that focused on the prolonged isolation of space travel and the psychological effect it would have, I think that would have actually been a better way to go with The Martian. I don't often say this, but I actually think The Martian would have benefited from being a little bit darker and grittier. And I don't mean like modern, edgy, dark movies, right? They've become a horrible, all too common stylistic choice these days. But just in the interest of making the film a bit more mature and realistic and grounded, it might have been ideal for this kind of story about survival, right? Essentially, The Martian lacks the depth it really needed to make it a great film. Despite some wonderful action set pieces, beautiful cinematography, and a charming primary character, it's a frustrating film for me because I think greatness was well within reach. It just doesn't quite make it. Let me know your thoughts on The Martian in the comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.